Welcome back to another episode of the Independent Business Podcast. And today you are in for a treat. Ashlyn Carter, the founder and CEO of Ashlyn Writes, a copywriting business for creative entrepreneurs, joins us on the show and we talk about everything. Ashlyn shares with us her incredible journey of leaving her corporate job to start her own business, how she manages her mental health, these amazing pricing strategy tips, and how to be more confident in our story and copywriting. This episode is jam-packed with so many nuggets that every business owner needs to hear. Now let's get into the episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to like and subscribe so you never have to miss an episode. Before we dive in, please note that this episode contains a brief conversation about eating disorders. If you are not in a place to listen, we totally understand and encourage you to skip today's episode. Hello, Ashlyn. How you doing?
I'm so good. I'm pumped to talk to you.
I'm pumped for you to be here. I haven't seen you since January at Laylee's conference, the Creative Educator Conference. And let me tell you, you brought the house down. Okay. I'm not even going to deny. It was so good, so impactful. So I'm just really excited for you just to be here on the show and let's just talk about it. Like
Let's do it. I love
entrepreneurship and what that looks like
well,
for you.
And thank you for that. Cause I wrote that like on the plane coming over. And I know like right before we hit record, we were talking like sometimes the best stuff does come from this a little bit. Like I didn't work on that talk for months. I wrote from a place of like, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on. And so I'm glad it was helpful, but hopefully today can be like that too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Raw.
You know, raw, like, yes, absolutely. And I think that is something that I love about you. And like, fun fact, like I literally purchased your course when I first became an entrepreneur. I'm still in your copywriting course. Yeah. Like and I'm in your newsletter and I read them often because you're just so relatable, so fun. And it's truly like the raw, like you really just don't shy away from like whatever seasons of life that you're in, which I love. And I want to kind of take it back a little bit because I'm so interested to learn just more about you and Ashlyn. And, you know, you kind of had a very interesting experience leaving corporate into starting your business. So what did that exactly look like? Because, you know, there's like a whole bunch of layoffs right now in the tech industry. Like there are people like it's difficult and there are people who are like, I don't know what to do next. Or there are people in corporate right now currently. I mean, there's like 51% of adults, according to our Harris poll, they have considered leaving their job to go full time. So I just want to know about you when you were in that moment. What did that look like for you? Walk us through that journey.
Okay. I love it. And I think I love that there's probably just as many people who would argue that you should be in corporate and like build up your freelance portfolio before taking the jump, as there are people that would be like, nope, push out of the nest. Like that's the way to build it. I was a little bit more towards the other side. I was a journalism major, like never changed my major once, knew I wanted to work in some sort of writing, marketing capacity. And so I was in corporate, actually adored corporate, like too much. I loved it. It taught me so much. It sharpened me. I was in Atlanta. And so the brands I worked on were Atlanta brands, you know, Chick-fil-A, Delta Airlines, loved it. In my spare time, all my spare time, I did wedding calligraphy just as like a relief from typing. And so I would go to meetups, Rising Tide meetups actually in Atlanta. And this was like 2016. And I got this little taste of like, hold the phone. These people work for themselves and hit salary. Like what? And so that was weird. And then I started, I don't even know if I've ever said this before. I would go to the meetups and like say to my company, like it's a marketing like I'm going to go learn about marketing for my job. 100%.
I mean, technically true.
You know, I would be there being like, wow, like, let me ask questions. Like, could I ever do something like this? So it got that like taste. I don't know. It just kind of lit a fire in me. And so I started also accepting freelance writing work, writing for different websites, writing for different content marketing. Like I knew I could write. I didn't really know what capacity I could ever have a business in, but I just knew I could probably make some supplemental income. But I didn't get pushed out of the nest until my husband proposed, and it was like one more stressful thing. I did a terrible thing and started counting calories as a way to like hold hold something in control in my hand, because there were so many unknowns in where we were going to live, what my job was going to be. Like, I was stressed to the max. And so I totally out of left field developed an eating disorder. We got married. It was after that my mother-in-law looked at me. She was like, this is not going to work. Like, and my parents too. I ended up going into partial hospitalization for 3 months. And it was in there that I was like, okay, corporate was great. Doesn't serve me right now. I don't want to work in food marketing. Food has like been a thing right now lately. I got to do something. And so it pushed me. I would have never left corporate. I was so safe. I was so comfortable. It worked. Was I obsessed? No, but it worked. But I got pushed out of the nest. And so I had to like build my wings on the way down. And I think the traction of my business really hit about the second month I was on my own, and I realized, okay, there's a gap in the market, and it happens to be Ashlyn sized, and I can fill that. And so I tell people all the time, like, there is like a silhouette cutout of you in the market that you need to go fill and find that.
Oh my gosh, that is just so powerful, because I really kind of want to just, number one, thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, thank you. And two, it's so interesting how you said that you didn't have a lot of control. So this was the main thing that you can control. And so it's something that just like inadvertently developed. And so even too, I think I just want to highlight just with how you honestly, it's a really humbling, I feel like, experience to really be like, hey, like I'm needing help. And so like, I also too came out of desperation for my own business, and I didn't have a paycheck. Like I literally had one paycheck left before I was going to be like moving back in with my mom. And I was like, I'm either gonna, same thing. You just got to build it, right? Because you moved it. Yep. And it's like, you come from a certain type of desperation, no matter what that looks like, where it's like, you're more like, yes, you're going through something that's very difficult, but it's like, you're more fearless. You're more innovative. Like you just move so differently. Like you like, I ain't got nothing to lose.
No.
So
nothing to lose. Like I can't go back. That was not it. I like anxiety, depression had me so crippled. The Lord rescued me from that. I was like, I cannot go back. So I've got to figure out, like, you're hungry to figure out the next thing. And it's a weird, I would do it. Weirdly, I would do it again, because it like, not really. I don't want to go through it all, but like, I'm glad that that's my story. Cause I would, like I said, I would not have done it, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think another thing that you said was really, really interesting too, that you said earlier was like, okay, I felt comfortable, like you were comfortable in your corporate, but at the same time, it's really interesting the things that we get comfortable with, of like our depression, our anxiety, those types of things. They may not be the best thing, but it's so you're comfortable in it to where like you're more afraid of what the unknown will look like, to where you're more willing to sit within that than actually just taking the step forward. But I love how like your testament of like, this sucked so bad, but like I would go through it again to be able to have the life and the business that I have now. And so I just want to speak truth to that, and just like truly the business that you have built is just phenomenal, and the thousands of entrepreneurs that you have impacted is just absolutely amazing. And I think it just again shows that entrepreneurship is not easy, and like we have also our lives too that we have to navigate at the same time as building our business. So I really appreciate you highlighting that. But one thing I also love that you said was like, this is my story. This is my story. And that's the thing, is like you weave that so beautifully into your copy. Like anything, no matter what, like I'll look at your stuff up like, how did you like find these different, like the most random type of stories? But I think like the way that you do it is just so relatable. And so what do you have to say to business owners who are like, hey, like I want to share these aspects of my life, you know what I mean? But I don't know what that looks like for me. Like for you, how did you feel more comfortable? How did you navigate that?
Yes. Okay. I wrote down a couple of things, because studying this is fascinating to me. And I don't market to Gen Z. I don't buy into like all the Gen Z hype. Like, but I think watching that generation, kind of like any generation, they like kind of set the new standard. So 47% of millennials think that brands lie. 56% of Gen Z think brands lie. So Gen Z, everybody's hungry. Everybody thinks our marketers out to separate a fool from their money, right? So I think the more you can show up and be honest, especially when everything's like, we've got AI influencers out there now, like especially if you can be the disruptor against that, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be authentic. And I think it's so necessary. So the way I got more comfortable with it, you kind of like, I'm a big fan of testing my ideas in a safe space. So like with an email list or on stories, like just testing in groups. I'll say something on a call with our members, and like if the chat goes wild, then I'm like, okay. Or in a mastermind community where like I'm with peers and we're sharing stuff. So that's like one thing I always do is I test a lot of material before it ever kind of goes public. And so I want people to know, like, find your safe spaces and do that. I also, another principle I kind of live by is like, maybe it was I'm sure it was like Brene Brown or somebody said something about like waiting until your wounds kind of scar over a little bit. I do like, it's this tension between documenting the process in real time is really helpful for people, but I do want to always be like a little bit ahead, because you have to be, I don't know, you don't want to have a trigger warning on everything. And like, I think it can be helpful for you to, yeah, whenever I'm sharing things, I try to make sure I'm even just one step, two steps ahead when I'm sharing it. So those are two principles maybe that help. I would tell somebody that's wanting to be a little more open. Wait, I thought of one more thing. I was going to say, there's never been a better time to like, people ask me that all the time. Like, I want to sound like myself. I'm not sure I can. There's literally never been a better time. Like, God forbid the Instagram world of 5 years ago when we had these like perfect flat lays and everything was like that is not the internet right now. Run with that. Like, you haven't like, the internet is fun and messy again and like unhinged on Instagram. Like, cancel culture kind of ended. Like, people are over that. So like, go be you, like find your people, read that, what is it, 1,000 true fan, that it's an old article. Like, really all you need is 1,000 people who, you know, are picking up what you're putting down. You could probably find those people. So be yourself. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think what you highlighted is just such a good point that I want to highlight, of just that balance, right? Because number one, I just want to say to you, like, you don't have to, and I've said this before too in other episodes, like, people always initially associate, like, I have to have something super heavy and negative that has happened in my life. And it's like, no, like, you share so many relatable things that would be considered mundane. This is like, you just share your everyday life in your content. Like, no matter what season that you're going through, you're like, hey, this is where I'm at. And like, you don't shy away from it. Like, you just spill the real as an entrepreneurship. And that's why I read them. I love them. And I think I love that how you said, like, you have to just sometimes be ahead, because it is a fine line that you have to walk with really just being yourself and stuff like that. Like, if you're sharing it and you know, like, ooh, like emotionally, like this still hurts and stuff like that, maybe pull back and process it internally by yourself before you share. But I love how you said, like, I keep it in a safe space first of really sharing, of like, whether in my mastermind or in my stories, like, find those safe spaces in your business to see what that feels like for you, but then also too for your audience. And I think it's just such a good way of like really honoring ourselves. I love that. And I love too of just the fact that the number is getting higher with each generation of like people just not really trusting and believing brands. And I think, especially to your point with AI influencers, like, now more than ever, people want the unfiltered, the raw. And I think that was really highlighted. Do you think that especially after 2020, that was highlighted even more?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. And I think like the way, like to your point, Akua, about story too being like mundane, I think the more like 2020, everything just pushed us into this. We want the reality show version of your life. Like, we want to know. I think people worry sometimes. Story people think like, oh, it has to be this heavy, like my testimony, my like no, like tell me like how you're chugging a Celsius a day because you're trying to stay awake and work while your kids are asleep, and then your husband just told you Celsius has some ingredient that you don't need to, be drinking. How does that relate to like, did you know, I don't like correlate. If I can connect like a simple anecdote from my life, take a segue and connect it to content like SSP. I always think about that: story, segue, pitch. Like, how you can use that with the most mundane things. I think people freak out when they hear like incorporate story. Tell us about when you found a gray hair. Like, tell us about just a story. Can be an anecdote. It can be a sentence. That can be a story, but people are looking for exactly what you said, that relatable moment that, oh my gosh, you too, that moment in your writing, it goes so far while everybody's out there thinking brands lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, I think to your point of this, it just really goes back to really knowing your values. Like, and like you said, like just being bold and being you, just stepping into that. And so a thing that I'm really curious about though is what you just how I think a lot of people, number one, I think we have to be open. Number one, I say this all the time, just really being open to, you have to train your mind to think that way,
Yeah.
honestly,
Yes.
because you really, really do. And I want to
You
know
do.
for you, how did you train your mind?
Oh,
Like,
that's
how did you
good.
train yourself to where now it's like, it's rolling, like
Yes.
where you're creating that copy?
I'll tell you
How do you,
exactly what it is. I think I like
yeah.
internalized the phrase good writers are just good noticers of life. Like if you
Mm,
can just understand that, like just notice life, it's all around you. Anything that happens in the day. Like if you I think like maybe a more practical step, make yourself at the end of every day write down one thing that happened to you that day. Like just make,
mm,
and I think you don't even have to ever use that in your writing, but it just trains you to be like, write down like a gratitude journal, write down 3 things every day that you're thankful for. Like that'll make you kind of write some stories if that's a better prompt for you. But if you can just make yourself force yourself to pause and think. Cody Sanchez said something like the best ideas don't come from Zoom meetings. I was like, that is true. Like when you practice solitude and you just get quiet even for 5 minutes, I have
mm.
more ideas in those quiet moments than I do in like the whole day if I'm talking or just going at full force. So yeah, I think that's how I trained myself.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really like simple because I do the same thing, even just as storytelling. I'm like, people are like, how you do it? I'm like, I journal. I journal
Yeah.
or I go for a walk. Like that's where my best
Oh
ideas come from.
yeah.
I stick in my AirPods, put in a podcast, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh. And I don't like listen to business types of podcasts.
Love
I will
it.
literally just be listening to like something that brings me joy, something that makes me laugh.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I'll just have like some of my best ideas that I'll highlight.
Yep.
And again, I think you just need to bring people, I think that's just what people want. People want to know realistically like what's happening in your business. And so for you, even as everything that you've walked through, how have you maintained your mental health? I think that's a really big thing as business owners. I'll be quite honest, even too with myself right now, I'm struggling a little bit. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Just sometimes those waves of loneliness, it just hits. And when you are in it, you don't, it just comes crashing. It comes crashing on you. And I'm trying to work really hard
I
on
love that.
preventing, those heavy waves hitting and before it hits. But I think for you, just how have you, you've been in the game for, like you said, since like 2016, you've been in the game for a good minute. How have you been maintaining your mental health through all of life, just in general? Good seasons, hard seasons,
$1 million.
in between seasons.
Yeah. Okay, that's so good. And I love how raw this is. I like that's the $1 million question. I think I'm always looking for how to Ashland proof my business because I know
Mm,
me, I have my number. I've seen me at like rock bottom. So as
mm,
I've then like gone through and like had kids, gone through pregnancies, ups and downs, hormonally of all that is, and then like what that does to your business to walk away from it for a while.
mm,
Um, I think that one of the big things, like I'm a firm believer in coaching, firm
mm,
believer. Like I will pay for a coach. I've done it every year, but when I had my first kid, he's 5 now. I didn't because I was like, well, let me see if I even want to do this with a kid. And then verdict,
mm.
yes, I do. So I like went back and got coaching, but just constantly having somebody I can be like, can you tell me I'm being an idiot? Like, can you tell me that these are completely asinine thoughts that I'm having right now? Because the game of entrepreneurship is what's between your ears and like is your mindset that determines everything about your
Mm,
business. So yeah, I have to work really hard at it. I have to protect it at all costs. I mean, like practical things, I'm a nut about my time, and nut, an
mm,
absolute crazy person about my time, because I know like if I don't get that time to think or to write, I risk building a business that I hate. I've had moments, I would say probably like every 2 years I have a moment where I'm like, do I like this? Like what is this? What are my offers? And I think it's hard too if you develop a business in it's easy to maybe have those come to Jesus moments if your business isn't doing well. But if your
mhm,
business is doing well, it's
mhm,
harder because then you're like, why? I have no reason to complain. I have no reason to doubt. Like it's spinning. But like if you hate it, if it's drudgery, and if you're like crumbling on the inside, you're not going to be able to sustain it. So I think not being afraid to sit down and kind of ask yourself regularly, like, do I like this? Is this working? Can I sustain this? Can I scale it and not lose my mind?
And not lose my mind. Yeah. But you said earlier too of like, there's times that you've had to walk away
Oh, yeah.
from your business. And let's talk about that because I feel like that's just not talked about enough. If just like there's so many multitude, like there's so many shifts that happen to that where you even literally have to walk away, even if things are going good.
Yeah.
So like, what has that been like for you of like, and I think it's just a reminder of like, it's okay to walk away from your business either permanently and start something new, or maybe even just for a season.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
First of all, I think it comes with you do have to go at business in the good seasons as, can this run without me? Build it to sell, even if you never want to sell. You have to, because then you will not afford yourself the opportunity for your like WTF moment. Do I even like this? So I think like the benefit, I have been able to walk away multiple times, whether for maternity leave, sabbatical. I'll talk about a moment in just a minute in February, but it's because I had the systems in play where the business could sustain for a minute without me. So, because I do understand, like, that's kind of a luxury, but it came at a very hard cost and a lot of work. And constantly, it's that Atomic Habits quote where he talks about, like, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems, like having that mindset always. So then the moments of walking away, even this, like I had my third kid in, what was that? October? When were you born, Fields? October, beginning, end of September. Come back from leave. I'm back for like a week, and my mom has 2 aneurysms and goes into the hospital. So she's in the ICU. Praise God, we just moved back to my hometown. So she's literally 6 minutes down the street. I was in the hospital all the time. So like, yet again, I'm stepping away from my business. I'm needing it to run when I can't. And that, it was just like, it makes you look at death and everything and think like, do I like this? And I had another moment where I kind of looked at everything and thought, I don't know if I love my business. Like the outsides don't match the insides. Like and I shouldn't have to complain, or I don't think I can complain because it looks good. But that a teammate called me out on it. She's my oldest employee in the business. She was like, Ashlyn, you're in a different phase of life now than you were when you started it. So I think that too, realizing like if you have a business that even 2 years old, like you may be at you have different thoughts, you have different experiences, you've cut your chops a little more, you probably are a little bit feistier about your opinions because dang it, you've been doing it day in and day out for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more years than you had. So giving yourself space to think through the implications on that for your business, I think, is paramount.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Really bringing it back to the systems, and that you said like you have to really build your mindset to really build the business for your future self. Like what?
Yeah.
And so, because again, life happens. You have no clue what's going to happen tomorrow. You have no clue what's going to happen a year from now, right? And again, I think it's constantly checking in with yourself to have those hard questions, even when things are going good, because I feel like that's what matters more than when things are going to shit.
Yep.
Sorry,
You know I love it. I love it.
I think that matters totally way more. And I think to your point of like, because when things are going hard, you don't have the time, right? You're just now in a completely different, you're just in a different mode of essentially trying to survive. And so having those systems in place to really keep you afloat, make sure that your business is keeping, because you have other people relying on you as well, right? Clients, you have a team. And so really having those systems in place where you're like, I am not 100% right now, and I have to give my 100% towards something else that's way more important to me. And I think that's just such a really good reminder of like, we are more than our businesses. And so for you, building those systems, what did that start looking like to you? What do your systems look like now, number one? And when you first started, like what systems are really key and important for you to running a sustainable business?
Okay, I love it. And completely non-paid reference to Loving Honeybook. Like we've used it for years because it manages our entire agency, just like one half of my whole business. So I am a nut about my batch days. Like I say like batch is a bad word for it. Theme days, like having certain tasks that I do on certain days. So like I know I'm in a certain mindset on any day of the week. I've hopefully trained my team on this, but like I live and die by, if I'm doing something for the third time, I write it down, because even if and it will take more time to write it down, but like if you've done something more than two times, chances are you're going to do it again.
Mhm.
It's hard to stop and write SOPs, but that's the place. God, it just bites you in the butt if you don't, honestly. And I remember sometimes I've had employees that'll say like, well, I stopped the clock because it like took me a little longer to do that. I'm like, no, I want the clock on. The clock stays on because we need to figure out exactly how long that takes from even a cost of goods standpoint. Like I can't properly price our services, for example, if I don't know that that client project doesn't actually take, 30 minutes worth of research, it takes 3 hours. We need to know that. So I think that's another like big system. Whenever we develop any of our SOPs, we always have it broken out to the 0.25 of an hour. So the 15-minute
Mhm.
mark. So that, that research phase took 1.25. That sending that email put to 0.25, 15 minutes. Like doing that for all of your client systems, game changer. Because then you can figure out how many can actually be done in a month and make sure you're charging appropriately and all that pricing stuff that keeps a lot of people, I think, locked into maybe not good system because you just feel like you're a slave to it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I was going to say, let's talk about pricing. I feel like we're jumping everywhere,
Oh,
but I think
I love. I think the sales copywriter in me is like, yes, heck yes, pricing.
yes, I because yeah, I didn't think of that. I just remember I feel like pricing is something that we should be visiting often in our business, but I think
Yep.
because the fact of how draining and frustrating it can be that we don't. And
Yes.
so then before we know it, our business has evolved. And then here we are again, like, oh shoot, like I have
Yes.
to figure this
Hating your
out.
client work because you're like, I'm not
Yes.
getting paid enough. Like you come to despise the work when you don't feel, and you need to be so, we, for the first time ever, we've had an interior designer help out in one room. She was like, Ashley, I just hate sending an invoice. And I was like, no, like, please send me the invoice. Because I know the value of my time. I know how much my hours cost. And I know that I can go spend an hour on something in my business and make more money than I'm paying you to do something that would take me 10 times as long. And I would be freaking
Mhm.
bleeding money because I don't have the hookups that you do. I don't know. I would be clicking on wayfair.com and like trying to figure out stuff that you already know. So understand. Oh, I have like ocean in a teacup thoughts over here on pricing. So I just cut you off entirely, Akua.
No, no, but please, like, that's what I love, though. I think again of like the fact that you even tracking. I think that's even a good place
Yes.
to stand, like, start
Yes.
of tracking your time of how
Track
long
your
does it
time.
take you to do. Yep, like because I do that with my storytelling strategist, like my intensive.
Yes.
So they're like we meet for 4 weeks before we even have the intensive. So I started tracking of how long it takes me to do it. So
Yes.
then that's how I ended up being like the intensive. Everything total is 5 weeks because I
Love
had a
it.
beta and then tested them of how long it took them and
Yes.
tested how long it took me. And then I felt more comfortable because yes, it's true. If you feel undervalued and underpaid, you are going to hate your work.
Yep.
So I think what tips do you have for business owners of how we can be checking in regularly with our pricing and how can we price our services in a way as our business evolves to where we still consistently feel excited and passionate about the work that we're doing?
Love it. Okay, first I defer to Sheena Skidmore. She's the pricing queen. I think I first learned pricing from her back in 2017. So I've taken like what she does and here's like my spin on it. But
Mhm.
essentially, like I think the principles come down to knowing your hour, like knowing how much your hour costs to your business. So like your revenue divided by number of hours you want to work. What is like I can either like scroll Instagram and DM or I can like bang out an email, but like that my hour is worth X amount of dollars. Put it on a sticky note on your desk so you're always aware of that. I think understanding too, them, especially as service providers, we feel weird about a markup. I think like product people, like
Mhm.
you kind of know when you buy a shirt, it probably costs them half as much to make it, right? But when it comes to
Mhm.
our services, sometimes I think we cost it at cost. That's not, you can't be profitable that way. You can't. Uncle Sam freaking takes 30%, you've got to be able, not to mention reinvest in your business, all the hours you put in marketing that didn't even go into the cost of goods for the product. So for my service providers out there, thinking through like you have hard costs, you probably have a client gift, if there's any
Mhm.
your, type form software that every client uses and whatever. So you find your hard costs, but then understanding exactly like we were saying, if 8 hours go into the project and you are going to pay a freelance, I don't know, photographer, freelance floral designer, whatever, to do that thing, what hours would that be? Look at the combo. How much is this the cost of it? And then the scary part, double it, because you have to, I would at least double it. Some people would say the cost should be 40%, which is even scarier, but like at least to double that, that's kind of what you should be charging, because you're going to then get a little bit of a profit, which is good. You have to be paid as the CEO. But yeah, like we said, the chunk of change is going to the government and taxes, and then you've got to reinvest back in your business and just keep the lights on, all the other fees that didn't go into the making of the thing itself. And I think a lot of that is what keeps, one of the stats that like drives me nuts is how many female-owned small businesses don't ever hit six figures, which if you don't want to, fine, great, I love it. I'm a big fan of knowing your number, hitting it and resting. But if you need to be able to break that, because you need to be able to hit, making $100,000 kind of does boil down to like a decent salary, 40, 50, 60K, which is like a good salary. And it just drives me nuts that a lot of people don't hit that, and they want to. And not on my watch. And I think a lot of that gets broken down with pricing. Or people then, I'll have one more thing to say. People then see that sticker number on what they should be charging, and they think, I can absolutely not charge that. I'll just undercut and I'll win on pricing. And then you hate your job and you're exhausted.
You hate your job. Yep.
Yes. So figure out that big scary number, and then let's market. And that's where sales copy comes in. Let's sell to sell that. Like you can't argue that price point. People are still buying things. People do still see value in paying. But you have to make sure on the back end and you don't hate your gig.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, again, some key points. Number one, tracking your time, right? Like, and then also to looking at the things that you have to keep the light on, the things that every single month that cost to be able to run your business, right? And then it's like, if you need to pull in other people to the project, look at that, look at those numbers, double it. I think, and to your point, for Amana Kua, that is a product-based business for me and my mom that we have. And we like to be able, in order to make the 50%, we had to double it. And so for me, it's easier for me to process on Amana Kua. I don't feel guilty literally pricing for Amana Kua, because the formula's in there and the system's in there with all of our packaging, supplies, how long it takes us, like all of that. So then I put it in, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the price. But when I do my service-based business, I'm like,
I know we break down when we think about it for services.
Well, yeah, we break down. So I love that you highlighted the comparison between the two, because it's like, yeah, then you have to really look at because the service requires you, it requires your time. So really, again, creating those systems in place of like how you're going to be able to track your time when you are building out those services. Okay, like what are other key pieces that I need to delegate or automate in my business, and how much does that cost? You know what I mean? I think, again, it just goes to the fact of data. Data tells the story of how you need to lean into your business, but data also tells the story of how you're able to get clients. And so let's talk about sales copy as well. Like, let's transition into that of like, when you really do feel confident in your pricing, it makes it a lot easier to be able to sell your products and share the value of what it is that you offer. And so you touched on that a little bit, but let's talk about that. Like, oh, you're like, all right, cool. Now I'm tracking all these things. I feel really confident about my pricing. How do I now feel confident in my copy to sell these products and services? How do I weave in some of this data to do some data storytelling? Like, how do I weave in some of like these relatable factors that get people excited and address these pain points? I just gave you a crap ton of questions within that. So
I was just thinking, I was like, I think you just know my love language. Like, we speak the same. This is so good. I love it.
Yes.
So I think in the whole, when you're saying how, or we've established like this whole, it's weird to do on the service provider side. I think it's because there's something to it where you're like, but it's easy for me. But like, I'm good at this. I shouldn't upcharge. And so once you get through that, and like you said, you have this confidence with your pricing and you're excited about it, and you know it's a damn good offer and you're excited to get it in the hands of people, then I think the selling of it is fun, because you have that, but then you can lawyer up well. Like, you can argue like an attorney for why someone should pay for it. You said data. Like, one of the best things I love to do is, I guess you would call it data-driven storytelling, where you're arguing. We all know the emotional side of your brain purchases first. You already decide if you want to buy something or not. And then your brain is going, well, is that a good idea? Like, is that smart? Do we already have that? Have we already gotten that solved in life? It's kind of talking you out of it. So I think that's where data can come in and argue either. And I think a data point looks like a testimonial. It looks like a statistic. It looks like a fact. It looks like information from somewhere else on the internet as a supporting factor in it. Like, if you think about the evidence, like any lawyer show you watch, and you watch them get up there and they've got they're presenting the evidence because they're arguing why something is to be. So doing that in your creative small business as well. It's not just, wedding photography, but arguing for, like, why is that even important in their home? Why is that going to matter in 10 years, in 30 years, in 50 years? Yeah, that's the stuff I love. And the word choice for it, I'll say one thing too is, it comes in there's an order to the message. So I think some people think about sales copy. I need to be creative. I need to be storytelling. I need to, like, use my thesaurus, all that kind of stuff. Yes, but it's also just the organization of the message. And coming in and saying the right things in the right order is a lot to do with copywriting. And that's why I talk about frameworks all the time. I talk about different formulas because the words matter, absolutely. But the words are really this juxtaposition of, like, what you want to say, your voice, your story. We kind of talked about that. The dog whistles in your copy that help people understand, that is for me. Like that, I literally Googled that yesterday. That combo in a framework is good sales copy. And I hope it intimidates people less because it's not about this, like, Hemingway in a cafe in Paris moment, as much as it's being a good assembler of pieces you already have. You already have them. It's just the organization of them.
Yeah. And I think too, that's such a good, because obviously I've taken your course and this was a huge game changer for me because I think, especially in regards to copy, a lot of people really struggle to find their voice and how they show up. And you had it in your course to go back and look at past content.
Yes.
Your social media, listen to old interviews,
Yes.
listen to and I did. And I was like, oh, I say these things a lot that I really like, and like stuff like that, to where I started to become more confident in the language.
Love it.
And then you also had, as well, just interviewing your target audience so that you're down to using the same language that they're using.
Yep.
So really going back to looking at past clients and stuff like that. And that's what it really helped with me, like really putting in that framework with copy. And so I think, like, you literally provided such really good places of where to start with that, of like, if you are a business owner, you're like, okay, like I need to create these sales copy. Again, it's the order. And so what is that framework? Some of the, like, these quick tips of like what this framework can look like.
Okay. My favorite go-to one that I use all of the time, like whenever I'm stuck or I'm just like, I got to whip this email out. What do I say? PARIS. So problem or pining for. A is for agitation or amplify. R, remind them what they want. I, interesting data point. We just talked about that. Sell their brain, sell their rational thinking, and then introduce the solution. So those are two frameworks I use all the time. That's one. The other one I was going to say is, I mentioned it earlier, but story, segue, pitch. It's like my go-to email. Like, I will think of the weirdest thing that happened in the past 24 hours. Take that, because it's interesting. Drop them in the middle of the rising action with that. Like, sometimes it can be like people are winding up. Don't wind up the story that much. I'll figure it out. Just drop me in. I'll work myself into it. Segue, you could ask ChatGPT, give me 10 segues. Anytime you listen to, like, a good TED Talk or a good, I don't know, sermon, there's like plenty of people that use it's kind of like that's a segue. It's just that connector piece. And then the pitch, what you want them to do. I think there's somewhere on my Instagram, I did that formula. If that interests anybody, you can go to my Instagram formula. It's like, it looks like a ChatGPT like picture. Because that you can throw a story with that formula into ChatGPT and it can spit you out a newsletter. Like, that framework can work so well and so easy. And I hope that just, again, helps cement with people. You don't have to, it really is just the organization of the message and letting people, the thing that you can do that a ChatGPT can't do is putting that story on it. That, to circle us back to where we started, it's those like little moments in your life that I want to hear, because I think all these brands are lying. So, like, tell me the real life. Like, tell me what's really going on.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think, again, it just speaks to the fact that you are your superpower. You are your gift.
Yes.
And I loved what you said earlier too. Like, I think we always have this misconception with storytelling that we always have to be like, we always have to start at the beginning. And it's like, you really don't.
No.
Just bring me to the action,
me.
hook me in, please.
Yes.
I can figure, like, I will be able to piece the dots together. Like, right. Like
Yes.
I think we have to give our audience more the benefit of the doubt, right? We always have this anxiety of like, well, they may not understand it, because I'm guilty of that. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
they may not understand it and this and that. And it's like, no, just experiment with it.
Just
Drop
experiment.
it, drop them in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. And then start and then connecting those dots. And like,
Yep.
again, I think that's just so, so key. And I love that framework. I think, again, it just makes it so much more simpler when creating that content. And if you're like, okay, with that framework, stick it into ChatGPT after what you've created and ask, like, how do I improve this grammatically, or, you know,
Yes.
tone or whatever. Like, there's so many ways around it where you can feel more confident as a
Yes.
copywriter. And so I feel like we've talked about so many things.
To be quite honest, I did not know we were going to be able to talk about all that.
I know. I didn't either. I just was like, well, we're just going here and here. And like, you know, oh my gosh, so many things.
I'm here for it. I'm proud of it.
Oh my gosh, all the things. But I think then this has been so helpful in just so many different ways. I think, again, like, just even wrapping everything that we talked about of number one, just how do you honor yourself as a business owner? You know, and no matter what you're going through in a season of life, like honoring that season, and also to what systems can you have? Like, really, again, like Shay Cochran said this in one of our previous episodes, and I'm going to keep repeating it, build the business that you want to have tomorrow. So really thinking about what systems do you want in place to make sure that your business is here tomorrow, whatever that looks like for you, really taking that time. And then even too with pricing, right? Even you have to take one tip today, just start tracking your hours, right? Again, like one thing that you can walk away with today with all the things that we can talk about of like, really take the look of like asking yourself those hard questions on a regular basis, even when your business is going well, of just consistently checking in with your pricing, how you're doing. Do you enjoy the work? Like so many different things that we have talked about. And even too, just like with sales, right? Like how can you bring people into the journey with you and walk them alongside with you, and don't be afraid to just be unabashedly, I don't even know the word.
Unabashedly.
Don't be afraid to be. Thank you.
Listen, I always tell people I'm actually like the worst speller I know. And so I'm very like copywriting and copy editing are two different things. So
yeah. So yes, but I love that so much. And so Ashlyn, a question I want to ask for you is like, what's next for you in this season? Like, you know, I know you said you have so many, you know, you're getting used to like your kiddos going to grade school and all those things. So like, what's next for you as a business owner, as you are navigating these new seasons of life?
Okay. This is like the real life stuff. I told my husband this morning in our bathroom, I was like, I was not expecting to like, I think it's weird being like such a worker bee and then having kids and being like, well, didn't see that feeling coming, but like seeing them out for the summer and hearing them. And I'm like, I love my job, but like, I want to sit with them in the backyard with the sprinkler on. So I think what's next is trying to figure out, like, get out of always a bridesmaid mode. We have evergreened and like helped build so many of our clients as like evergreen offers. Guess who is not? So I think like figuring that out is something I really want to do. And I think too, I get asked a lot about, you know, evergreen or live launch. Like we are an on-demand world, man. Like people love to be able to, YouTube, I learned, is streaming more than Disney Plus and Netflix. Like people like to be able to watch things or learn things on their time. And so I'm such a believer in a live launch and I love it. And I will continue to try to do 3 a year. But that is one thing I want to play around with, is like, how can we serve people in this on-demand world and still be able to, you know, So I think that's what I'm trying to like sift through and have some white space in my calendar to think, okay, what would that look like? Because I want to sit and watch my kids in the sprinkler and the water table in the backyard.
Yes, I love that. And I think, again, it just goes to the fact of how with business owners, we have to consistently be innovative because times change consistently and you have to move along with the time. So really creating that space, no matter what that looks like, but being intentional about creating that space to really explore about things that you want to offer in your business and testing those out. So absolutely love that. And so this conversation has been so fun. And a question that I love to end with is, what do you think is the biggest differentiator between the businesses that succeed and the ones that fail?
Oh my gosh. Let me think for a minute. Actually, no, I can already tell you focus. I think focus, being able to say no and like firmly say no. That whole, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Like, dang it. If everything is not vying for our attention, I just learned over and over, it's your ability to crack down and like say no to that, which just, it matters, but maybe not in the moment, is dang hard. And so I think that's the difference. And yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's so important, is focus, because again, like when we're on social media and you see people, especially people in the same industry, right? And they're doing something, and like, and they're having this success, and you're like, oh shoot, right? You instantly in your mind of like, well, should I do that? Like, should I, what you think like, well, it worked for them. Maybe I should shift my focus here and this and that. And I think, again, it's just really, number one, thinking about the things that bring you joy as a business owner. What are your values? And again, like that just really helps keep you anchored and grounded on what it is that you're focusing on in that season, and like helping you stay in your lane. So
good. Yeah. Yes, if you look at that, like anyway, you could like Google like Michael Phelps, look over your shoulder, Google that. Cause there's some analogy, like he was in the lead and he looked over his shoulder and he lost the lead. And it's like the minute even if you see all these people doing things, but like I struggle with that sometimes, because I'm like, she's doing that. I'm like, well, I've got 3 kids and I want to protect the kingdom at home more than anything else. So like I can't even look over my shoulder and be like, that, what that writer is doing looks incredible. Like I'm extremely focused on what I'm building. And it includes that includes your life, I guess. That's not just your business. It includes the life you're building as well.
Yes. Oh, love that so much. Thank you so much, Ashlyn. I have loved this whole conversation. We've talked about all the things, but it was all so dang good. Love this so much. So for people who want to connect with you, where can they find you? How can we support you?
All right. AshlynWrites.com is my website, and where you can find the copy bar templates and everything. And then I'm better about Instagram these days. I had to get out of like the birthing era of my life. So I'm better on at Ashlyn S. Carter on Instagram.
Yes. Also sign up for her newsletter. It's amazing. Love it. I will say that. I'm on the list. So anyways, thank you so much, Ashlyn. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for being here. And until next time. That ends our episode of the Independent Business Podcast. Everything we've discussed today can be found at podcast.honeybook.com. Head to our website to access for show notes, relevant links, and all of the resources that you need to level up. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to make sure you never miss our future content. Drop us a review and leave our guests some love on social. And thank you again for listening.